As at the last count, at least 19 of the 35 states in Nigeria, including the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, predicted to experience flooding in 2017 had already been hit by the deadly disaster. From the predictions officially released by the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, NIMET, and the Nigeria Hydrological Services Agency, only the two states of Borno and Yobe in the northeast were not listed as states to be affected by flooding in 2017. Unfortunately, most of the states, if not all, ignored the flood warnings and did practically nothing to prevent it or mitigate its impact on the citizens and helpless communities. What the rest of the country was left with as the flood waters overran several communities was dozens of deaths and thousands of displaced persons. It was clearly history of as recent as 2012 repeating itself before everybody's eyes, pointing to the fact that the country may not have learned anything from the floods that took over most parts of the country barely 5 years ago. Hello and welcome. This is Straight Talk. I am TV, in Abuja, the Nigerian capital. You can also join me in the conversation here around the world on my online platforms on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. The worst of the flood disasters may have been over for Nigeria in 2017, with a prediction that the rainy season was going to end from around as early as October 4, 2017, in the extreme of the north. For some of the coastal states, however, they still have up till around December 25, 2017 to put up with the rains and the havoc that has been accompanying it, even though as the rainy season gradually winds down, it will be losing its potency. Lagos State in southwest Nigeria presented the worst case scenario of the 2017 flood disaster as early as July 8, 2017, when most parts of Victoria Island, Lekki, Oniru, Aja, Epe, Victoria Garden City, Ikoyi were all submerged, leaving thousands of persons stranded. The mainland was not spared, with neighborhoods in the areas like Sulure, Mushin, Ejibo, Lowenson, and Yaba also affected by the flood in different proportions. Some of the highways leading into the country's commercial center were also at some point flooded and the traffic badly affected. Lagos has its share of flooding year in, year out, but the proportion witnessed in 2017 came exactly 6 years after the city-state under then Governor Babatunde Fashola was forced to close down schools and declare a public holiday on July 8, 2011 to deal with one of the devastating floods that hit the state. This time, authorities say the floods swept through the city because the high tide of the lagoon slowed down the flow of rainfall water from drainage channels. The tide of the lagoon can be associated with the impact of climate change, but then the size and depth of the drainage channels or their not being constructed in some of the areas are clear cases of infrastructure failure that are commonplace across Lagos and other parts of the country. In addition, the man-made factors of blocking the few available drainage channels with refuse, and in some extreme cases, residents building on them, are a failure of enforcement.
In places like Lagos, especially the Lagos coastal areas, particularly those coastal areas that used to be mangrove, they used to be swamp or poto, as some people would say, wetland areas, which have been sand-filled. You now have a far bigger problem to tackle with, because these wetland areas were part of another intricate system, which was a drainage system, for those occasional times in days gone by when you would have prolonged rain and you'd have an accumulation of a lot of water, the wetland areas would absorb it. Most of Victoria Island was actually a mangrove swamp. The vast part of Lekki, especially phase 1, phase 2, all the way up to almost ABUJA, was a mangrove swamp, which in days gone by had been sand-filled. And unfortunately, for this incumbent government, they inherited a situation which was done very irresponsibly. It's not that you can't sand fill wetland areas, but when you do sand fill these wetland areas, you should take into cognizance the role that these wetlands have to play. They're not just there as a poto, they're playing a vital role in terms of drainage systems. And in days or years gone by, this wasn't done. Areas would just be sand-filled ad hoc without any adequate drainage being put in place, and it will spell disaster when you have heavy rains, which is exactly what we have now.
If you go to the coastal area, per se, trees will not be the only thing that will stop flooding. Flooding is a global phenomenon. It is not the rate at which the climate is changing that we are mitigating against it. So you still have the overall effect of these climate changes affecting us. Climate change happens at a quicker rate than before. That's what is happening. Before, it's not that climate has not been changing. It has always been changing. But it's changing faster now. And therefore, trees, when you plant them, I think it's inland. All those erosion we see inland will stop. Even on the coastal line. In the past, our forefathers used to plant coconut trees along. It's to hold the sand together because they know coconut grows very well in sandy soil and it will hold the sands together. We will still continue to propagate that and encourage that as a government. And like us here, we're a coastal state. A major part of Lagos State is under sea level. We will expect, some of this, but we are doing everything within our powers to make sure that we are ready for it when it comes. We advise our people, we talk to them, move away from coastal area to upland. We are also doing a lot as far as drainage rehabilitation and creation. We are constructing drainages all the time. We have not stopped. We have one of the best drainage connection in Nigeria. We know we're a coastal state, so we are investing heavily in it.
It has become common practice for developing countries, including Nigeria, to continuously play the infamous role of a victim of climate change. Lagos, as a coastal state, needs to do much more in terms of sustainable investment in preserving the environment. The state is on record as establishing the first government waste management agency in the whole of West Africa, and reportedly pioneered public waste recycling in the country in 1999. But then the sustainability of these efforts over the years remains questionable. Besides having no sustainable plan to manage the numerous canals across the state, investments in projects to fight ocean surge is not a priority for the government, just like is the case with the Alpha Beach, where a multi-billion naira project has long been abandoned for several years. The ocean surge along the coast of the Atlantic Ocean is fast threatening life in Okun Alpha community that sits on the shores of the ocean. The community, which used to be a famous tourist attraction to a high number of Lagosians, is today an eyesore and largely avoided by many residents of the country's commercial center.
This erosion, since it has begun, since maybe last 3 years, so the beach is there before. That is the footpath where people walk. It's down. So the water started coming gradually, destroying property of people. You can see there was hospital here before. As maternity, where people do come and treat themselves, they deliver. So the water has been coming, and they said it's because of this work they are doing, I don't know why they are not doing it again.
About almost 4 or 5 years when this surgery started, when they started this Atlantic field, it was then this surgery was too much. And we've wrote a lot of letters. Even Governor Fashola came here at our regime. He came here. Later, the presidency also visited this community. And since then, nothing has been done. And after that, we wrote a lot of letters to the Ministry of this thing, from waterfront. Well, that was when Prince Oniru was the commissioner for the waterfront. We wrote a set of letters. We have from reference. And there's one vehicle, there's one boat that was dredging sand inside this ocean. We wrote a letter to them that the ship was supposed to go some miles away. And now if you could see, sometimes the ship just came down, and as soon as it was dredging the sand was wiping away from the dry place to where they draw it to fill it back.
It was not long before the country's federal capital territory, Abuja, also became one of the victim states of the 2017 deadly flood disasters after flash floods had ravaged some neighborhoods in Nyanya satellite town from the onset of the rainy season. For the nation's capital, the absence of infrastructure in most neighborhoods exposes most parts of the territory to havoc whenever the flood disaster comes around. The sleepy town of Dede in Buari Area Council was where the flood chose to first hit the territory the hardest. 3 members of the same family met their death when the midnight flood submerged their house as it swept through the town. The FCT Minister Mohammed Musa Bello came calling, but only with a traditional condolence message for the bereaved family of Malam Abubakar, who lost his 30-year-old wife, his 4-year-old son, and 26-year-old sister-in-law. Residents of the community directly affected by the Dede flood disaster led us months after to the stream which they say brought the water that flooded their homes on that fateful day. Like the residents, we are not aware of any plans by the FCT administration to construct the banks of the stream in a way that will handle the volume of water it can carry, which leaves the hard-hit communities vulnerable even in the next rainy season. The clear case of infrastructural deficit in the territory is best captured by this small bridge provided for the densely populated communities located on both sides of the stream. Vehicles have to wait for each other to be able to use the one-lane bridge. With pedestrians, the residents shared their fears with us, including having a bridge that the railings that should support the pedestrians and even motorists are all long gone.
But that the way the thing happen where you carry a load. Even minister come here, he even enter here. Since that they will not hear anything to now. So that
when minister come here that time, do the community people, do they raise the issue? Tell the minister say
nobody come now down here. I hear say 3 people died there. So now only they come. He just come here. He enter my place here. He read the right, but nobody ask me anything. That's why I just they follow the loop to the minister go.
As we speak, nobody is talking about the helpless Dede community again, especially that it is for low-income earners who hardly have a voice. The other infrastructural undoing of the FCT authorities is in the Lukugomo district of the Federal Capital City that was designed to provide mass housing for residents of the nation's capital. We were at the popular Lukugoma Junction in 2016 to draw attention to the need for road infrastructure in the district, but nothing has been done by the FCT authorities. We are here on the Lukugoma Junction Road, here in Lukugoma district of the Federal Capital Territory, where thousands of families have taken up accommodation in a number of estates, a number of them almost in their hundreds here. But then the state of the access roads where that takes them to their houses has been in a very deplorable condition for a very good number of years. And just like you can see, a number of the vehicles just struggling to make their way in and out of their residential areas. More than a year after, a father and two of his children had to, on August 17, 2017, pay the price for the failure of the authorities to do the needful in providing the needed road infrastructure in Lokogoma district. The flood in Lokogoma, like in Dede, overwhelmed the stream, and substandard road infrastructure with the adjoining neighborhoods also hit so hard. The death of Kenneth Nwogu and his two children, who were swept away on top of the bridge in this sport utility vehicle by the ravaging flood, led to action by residents of the area. Dressed in black attire, the residents of Lokogoma protested to the office of the FCT minister, where they were addressed by no other person but the permanent secretary, Oha Chinyaka Christian.
We've discussed with their leaders, and as we are leaving this place, the engineers will follow you people to that place and make sure that the flood will not repeat itself.
This is the first time government is even coming to our own knowledge. They will have claimed they came in the night, they came in the midnight, they came when we were not aware, they came when we had gone to work, they came when we took our wives to maternity. But this time around, they say they are following us to go there to look at what should be immediately done, the palliatives that will be immediately done, put in place to avoid this kind of calamity. So they are going to look at the issue of making the place motorable and also see how they could upgrade the culverts that are there that will be serving as bridges.
We can, however, authoritatively nothing has changed in Lokogoma despite the promises by the authorities to address the situation sooner than later. In South Nigeria, Rivers and Bayelsa states seem to have presented the worst case scenarios in that part of the country, where affected communities are practically abandoned by the state governments to live with the flood disaster. Unfortunately, most of the badly affected communities are located outside the state capitals, so it is very convenient to ignore the plight of the victims. For Rivers State, it was dramatic when the floods ravaged parts of Port Harcourt, the state capital, with public offices like the State Sector Command headquarters of the Federal Road Safety Corps, the FRSC, and parts of the government reserved area, GRA, where the well-to-do live, were not spared. Thereafter, nobody was to hear about the flooding in the state again, but then the flood site remains Obiakpo local government area, where the finishing of the new road project constructed by the Governor Nyesom Wike administration is the cause of the flooding that has displaced thousands of residents in the area. In some of the areas affected by the flood, like the Rumocholu Annex Estate in Eneka town, we could only access them using canoe, where we saw the massive devastation and destruction visited on the innocent residents. For the victims to also access their flood-ravaged homes, they also have to hire the canoe, with some of them seen parking out of the area for what they say is a hopeless situation.
In this neighborhood, we are over 4,000 inhabitants here. This is the only time we experience things like this. It's really sad. And we've written both on newspaper, radio, television about it. Last time, yes, the deputy governor came, but before we realized it, she's not here again. She has come back. And then we went to government to complain. They said they are coming to see it. What we are trying to say is, what would the government do to rescue these people from this? I can't imagine you wake up in the morning, you see water in your compound, and for the past 3 months that this thing has been here, those blocks, of course, all of us know what it means for a building to be submerged with water. After this time, I don't think those houses will be valid again.
We hope the government will come and assist us. Not only relieve, but give us a permanent solution so that we won't have this thing again. That is exactly what we need.
You say the permanent solution. What would the permanent
solution? You see, I don't know whether it's the road they built. And that road, there is no drainage to Rukwaku. So if there will be a drainage, a canal from here to join that drainage through Alios Creek, or they can channel it through Eche, this Otamini River. So this will help us so that if there is any flood like this, the thing can drain to those areas.
Since they finished doing this on the Karapok Road, all the waters that can go to a place, to the river, were all directed to my backyard here. Our fear is drainage, to make drainage. To a possible drainage will be good here. To that road Amechi constructed. If they do drainage there to that road Amechi constructed from Igrita to Umukurushi, the waters will go to Umukurushi and go to the sea, to Woji, and enter inside the salt water.
What you are looking at is a junction of water in Rokwoku community of Obiakpo local government area in the River State, south in Nigeria, where the residents have had to deal with flood waters for upwards of 3 months and counting. And there are grave fears here that if the cause of this disaster is not addressed, there will be a reoccurrence in subsequent years. Rukwoku is another community that has been affected by the flood. Ignoring the risk, the residents have lived with the flood water for months. And out of their ingenuity, they have constructed a walkway to be able to access their homes. Hence, the River State government has not paid any attention to their plight. The problem of this particular community is compounded by some persons who officials of the state urban planning have allowed to build houses on clearly what should be waterways in the area, after the government has over the years failed to construct the canal that will channel water out of the neighborhood. What will you say is the cause of this?
Yes, the cause of this problem is that if you check, this water comes all the way from Igrita. From Igrita, it moves down to this borrow pit we have at this Rokwoku and Naka Road. Now, from that borrow pit down, there is supposed to be a drainage system that takes the water, cutting across this road you have here with a big culvert. If this water now moves from here straight, it will go to Eliozu. But the problem we have now is that right here, the people who built houses here have captured the whole drainage here from the whole waterway. So normally at the beginning there you have about 60, but when you come here behind this building you are seeing, you just have 3 feet. Each landlord is supposed to give at least 5 feet gap to create way for water. So if those waterways were created, we wouldn't have had this problem. All government will now do is to come there, maybe come with a swamp boogie and dig a proper drain of at least 6 feet down. As soon as that is done, you will not see any water here again.
When people were building on the waterway, did you complain?
Sir, you know, say 90 and they said this thing. We they complain because I don't day here more than 16 years. We are done day for a couple years. People where they want to buy, will tell them this place now waterway. But because of saying addresses where they sell the land for them, they know the years. They will think say this thing now if they won't be that then get money. So now it don't affect every both big man, poor man now. Nobody went inside this house again. So we need government help now.